that is essentially when we will be deploying the drogue parachutes, the small parachutes that are designed to further slow down the capsule as it is re-entering the atmosphere, as well as stabilizing it. And then a minute after that, we will deploy the drogue parachutes, and that is targeted for 11:44 a.m. Pacific, 18:44 Universal. And then just a couple minutes after that, we will have splashdown. So again, that's all in just under 44 minutes. Right now, we are performing the deorbit burn.
We've got a little over 7 minutes left in this burn. And the only performance call we've gotten so far is everything's still looking good with the propulsion system on Dragon. Once this burn completes, we will have kind of a couple minutes, about 3 minutes to catch our breath before things pick right back up and we get the nose cone closed. And then there'll be a bit more of a gap, and at that point, they will maneuver Dragon to its entry attitude, essentially heat shield pointed down and into the line of velocity, and that heat shield protecting them from the heat of re-entry. Temperatures getting up to about 3,500 degrees on the Dragon spacecraft. But everything looking good. We're about 5 minutes into this deorbit burn. Again, it started right at 10:56 a.m. Pacific time, 17:56 GMT. Dragon was flying about 260 statute miles just off the southwestern coast of Australia.
So right now, during this burn, we just heard a call that we're halfway through the burn and everything is looking great, everything performing nominally. During this burn right now, Bob and Doug are currently monitoring the deorbit tool, which, like I said earlier, captures things like the perigee, the reentry interface, how much time, or excuse me, how much distance remains before the burn itself is terminated. They're also monitoring the burn duration and the firing of those Draco thrusters located there at on the forward bulkhead of the capsule. There on your screen, you actually can see what Bob and Doug are seeing right now. That is that tool on their screen. So on the left and the right of the center screen, that is the deorbit. That is the deorbit monitoring tool.
Just past 7 minutes into the burn, a little over 4 minutes remaining. Everything's still looking good with Dragon Ship Endeavour's deorbit burn to commit it to coming home. Everything continuing to be on track for our splashdown. Again, our splashdown time right at 11:48 and 24 seconds Pacific was the calculated time. It would be typical if we're a couple seconds on either side. But that time is 18:48 GMT or Universal. But we're already through several of the really major steps to initiate this re-entry. The claw is separated, the trunk is gone, the deorbit burn has begun, and we're more than halfway through, just a little under 3.5 minutes remaining.
There on your screen is a shot of our Mission Control Center here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, where the Dragon operators and mission leaders are there monitoring Dragon's progress. They continue to watch the propulsion data and all the GNC data, making sure that everything is looking healthy and nominal.
And we're just about 2 minutes, 30 seconds until the end of this burn. We'll listen for the call out up to the crew on the performance of the burn, and then they'll start moving into the next steps. Again, we'll get about a 3-minute breather before the next major milestone comes up when we get ready to close the nose cone, that protecting the docking ring, guidance, navigation, and control sensors, and also these 4 forward bulkhead thrusters that are currently performing the deorbit burn during the actual reentry process. So we are at just under 2 minutes from the conclusion of the deorbit burn.
Again, Dragon is committed to its splashdown point. There is no going back.
Yeah, we already have the recovery team ready and on standby. They've been there for quite some time now. Here, and we have about 90 seconds left in the burn. Weather looking great at the splashdown site off Pensacola. Winds just around 2.5 miles per hour. Sea being described as like glass by the Corps here in Hawthorne, radioing up to the crew. Ended up getting fantastic weather for this first crewed splashdown of Dragon. We are 1 minute away from the end of deorbit burn.
Again, this burn is placing Dragon on its final trajectory to the landing site off of the coast of Pensacola, Florida. That is in the Gulf of Mexico. And our recovery vessel, Go Navigator, and the recovery team are ready and waiting to see Bob and Doug come back through the atmosphere. Like we said, this deorbit burn, during this deorbit burn, they're not actually re-entering the atmosphere just yet. That won't happen for about another half hour or so. This is essentially just lining up Dragon on the right course to that splashdown site.
Yeah, still in an altitude of about 254 statute miles over planet Earth. We are coming up on 10 seconds from the end of the burn, so we'll stand by and wait for the call out to the crew on the burn performance.
Dragon, SpaceX, deorbit burn complete, performance nominal, nose cone closure initiated.
Nominal burn, nose cone in work.
All right. Deorbit burn complete. We heard the call, nominal burn. Bob and Doug are on their way back home. This burn commits them to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Ooh, all we have left now is to wait. That was really one of the last major moments before they start re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. We'll have the nose cone closure coming up next. That should be coming in just a couple of minutes, as we had about a 3-minute span between the end of the deorbit burn and that moment.
Yeah, the nose cone is actually currently in the closing process, so it doesn't just snap shut. It does slowly close and lock. So right now, that nose cone is in the process of moving back into the closed position, and we will hear the call out for whenever it has fully closed and whenever the latches have secured.
Seeing some data, it looks like it's about halfway there. It's opened a little bit more than 90 degrees. I think the exact count was 110 degrees opening range or range of motion for the nose cone. So we're a little more than halfway now to getting that nose cone closed. I have just heard that we have a visual on nose cone closure.
So it'll take a minute for the hooks to close in. They close in a series, so the first series will close and then the second will follow, and that'll take about a minute to complete.
All right, well, as we just wait for the finish to that nose cone closure, we'll have a bit of time again. We'll have about 20 minutes or a little over 21 from right now until we really start re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. We're expecting that entry interface in about 21 minutes. And then right around that time, we'll also be looking for that blackout we've been talking about. We've had a little bit of what we call radicom at this point. So you'll hear kind of some sporadic interruptions in the audio transmission just because of how Dragon was oriented for the trunk jettison and for the actual deorbit burn. But that blackout period will be due to the plasma that builds up around the capsule, interfering with those antennas either sending or receiving data.
So I've heard the call out that the first set of hooks for nose cone closure are in motion. So this will complete in 2 sets. The first set is now in motion. So really good news to hear that. Everything looking good so far. Like I mentioned before, in the background, Dragon has inhibited the forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete that deorbit burn. This is to ensure that it's safe to latch that nose cone shut for reentry. Also, the vehicle has initiated the nitrox purge. Nitrox is simply a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen. It's what we breathe. And the nitrox that is being purged into the system is cooled, so allowing that cool air to circulate around the cabin, but also inside of Bob and Doug's suits will help to keep them cool and comfortable during re-entry, which will be coming up in about 20 minutes. We're currently tracking 23 minutes and 20 seconds until entry begins. So in case you're just joining us at this point, the nose cone has closed. The forward thrusters have been disabled, and we are latching the nose cone. Currently underway with the first set of hooks. The first of 2 sets. And we just had confirmation that the first set of hooks is closed, so now the second set will begin to close as well.
As we mentioned, after this nose cone's fully closed, we'll have a couple of minutes to catch our breath again, about 20 minutes or just under 20 minutes until Dragon will start to maneuver itself to the entry attitude, essentially pointing the heat shield in the direction of travel as it's going to be leading the way through their reentry through the Earth's atmosphere. We'll look to run into that communications blackout at about 36 minutes after the hour, expecting that to last for about 6 minutes, and then we'll get that back shortly before we deploy the drogue parachutes, followed just less than a minute later by the main parachutes, and by that point hopefully we should have some views of Dragon re-entering the Earth's atmosphere and parachuting to a splashdown in the Gulf.
So there in the front row of Mission Control in the center, you can see CEO Elon Musk and our President Gwen Shotwell sitting side by side at those center consoles. In addition to those two, the room is filled with Dragon operators and mission leaders who are continuing to monitor the health and telemetry of the crew and the capsule. Right now, nose cone closure is underway. The first of 2 sets of hook latching has completed. And we just heard a call out that the
Dragon
nose
SpaceX nose cone is secure for entry.
Copy. We see it on board.
All right, great confirmation there. Back and forth from Mission Control here to Bob and Doug up in Dragon Endeavour. That Bob and Doug have also confirmed on their displays that the nose cone has closed nominally and it is secure for entry.
All right, so that nose cone close completion. A lot of tongue twisters with this right now. Coming with Dragon still flying over the South Pacific. It is on its way home. We're going to gradually start to see its altitude dip. Right now, already only 207 miles over the Earth's surface. It was at about 260 miles when it was still over on the other side of the Pacific Ocean off the southwestern coast of Australia when it fired its engines for that deorbit burn. So its altitude going to continue to drop. Once it gets to about 100 kilometers in altitude, or about 62 miles, it's going to begin what's known as entry interface. And that's when it really begins to start to feel the effects of the Earth's atmosphere. Will once again be experiencing lift and drag as it's no longer in that near vacuum environment in low Earth orbit.
So we're essentially stepping into the second half of entry. Dragon is now beginning to flush nitrox into the cabin and continuing to top it off in Bob and Doug's suits as well. Again, this is cool air essentially flowing through the cabin and the suits. This is what will allow them and the cabin itself to remain comfortable during reentry while those external temperatures reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. At this point in time, Dragon's orientation is such that the heat shield is pointing forward, if you will, leading the capsule toward the landing site. If you've been following along over the last couple days, you know that weather has been a big ticket item for us. The recovery team has been busy over the last week working to determine the selection of a landing site. In order to increase the options for space station departures, the team identified a total of 7 possible splashdown locations. In order to meet NASA's timeline requirements for crew recovery, these potential splashdown locations have to be close to a port, and they have to be close to medical facilities. So with all of that in mind, you add the ever-evolving weather conditions of Florida, but also that tropical storm Isaiah that was moving through. And it's easy to see how determining that landing site is quite a complex process. Since Dragon is capable of splashdown on either side of the Florida Panhandle, we in fact have 2 identical and fully equipped recovery vessels ready to support. One in the Gulf of Mexico, which is what we're utilizing today, Go Navigator, and the other located off the east coast of Florida, able to service landing sites in the Atlantic Ocean. That one is Go Searcher. Like I mentioned, today we'll be splashing down in the Gulf of Mexico, just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. Go Navigator, that recovery ship I just mentioned, is in place and ready and waiting for Bob and Doug. The WB-57 plane, if it hasn't taken off already, I'm sure it will be very soon.
It's in the air.
Okay, great. That's what will provide our first views of Dragon during reentry. We'll get a thermal cam off of that airplane, allowing us to see the capsule as it is re-entering the atmosphere. if you were tuned in for our Demo 1 broadcast, it was basically a big ball of light coming at us. We'll also have cameras on board the recovery vessel, so as Dragon gets closer and is deploying those parachutes, we will also be able to have hopefully some really clear footage of that all occurring as well.
All right, so Dragon's altitude continuing to dip. Right now about 174 miles over planet Earth. We're under 11 and a half minutes from where we expect to hit entry interface. So that's where Dragon will really start feeling the effects of being in a denser atmosphere. And then we are still tracking that blackout to come right around that same time. We are under 27 minutes away from splashdown. So we are under 27 minutes away from Bob and Doug being on planet Earth for the first time since May 30th.
To kind of put everything in perspective, the Dragon capsule departed from the International Space Station several hours ago, but according to what Dan just said, it's essentially halfway home just based on altitude alone. So the International Space Station is about 250 miles above Earth's surface. I think right now it's between 250 and 300. I think right now it's about 263 miles above Earth's surface. So based on that telemetry that Dan just read off, is from an altitude standpoint, Dragon is halfway home, and yet that second half is going to be covered in the next 27-ish minutes while we wait for splashdown and recovery, versus the several hours that we've been covering since yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, and we will continue to see its speed drop as it's dropping out of orbit. It's starting to hit the atmosphere. It's starting to slow from the effects of that friction, generating the heat on the heat shield and building up the plasma eventually around the spacecraft. Its speed's going to continue to drop. It's already below 17,000 miles an hour, and it'll drop to essentially a terminal velocity of about 350 miles an hour right as those drogue chutes deploy. And those are going to pop out when sensors on the Dragon spacecraft, both GPS and pressure sensors, tell the spacecraft it's at the right altitude, and then those will automatically deploy. Those drogues coming out of the top section of the spacecraft using two mortars, or pyrotechnics essentially, to deploy those to do the initial slowing and stabilizing of the Dragon capsule.
Yeah, then after that, the main parachutes will pop out and further decelerate it to about 119 miles per hour. And then that will continue to decelerate. And by the time that the capsule is splashing down in the Gulf of Mexico, it's only going 15, 16 miles per hour. So significant reduction in speed there over just the course of a couple minutes. That, of course, is a pretty comfortable speed. The way that the astronauts have described it previously with other types of missions also landing down, doing land landings at about the same rate. They said it feels like you're in a minor fender bender.
Yeah, you're definitely running into something. You'll feel it, but they do a lot of work with the seats and the restraints with these crew members just to make sure, while it may be a fender bender, you got more than a seatbelt essentially holding you in. So they're very secure in their suits and in their seats, and they're going to stay in there even after Dragon touches down. We'll still have communication with Dragon. Once they're in the water, it'll stay powered on. Probably most importantly, the air conditioner will continue to work while they're in the capsule in the now Gulf of Mexico, and much warmer temperatures than they've seen for the last couple of months. And we'll still be able to talk to them from here in Hawthorne, and the recovery teams will be able to as well.
Yeah.
One of the things we might see them do, depending on sea states and everything after they touch down and the crew themselves, they'll still have a couple of demonstration tasks potentially to carry out. They have a satellite phone inside of the capsule that has its own satellite antenna integrated into Dragon, and they're able to use that independent of Dragon's communication system. So one thing we might hear them do is do a test call on that to the teams here in Hawthorne. We wouldn't be able to hear the call, but you would hear the go to do it over the Dragon to ground audio that we've been listening to this entire time. So Still have a couple of demonstration steps, essentially, as, again, this is a test flight. This is the flight to really prove out Dragon systems, to bring crew members from Kennedy Space Center to the space station and return them safely to Earth. And so far, we have had a flawless ride downhill. We've completed the deorbit burn. Dragon is continuing to drop down. It's right now at about 132 miles over the Pacific Ocean. Pretty soon we're going to see its ground track cross over Central America, out over the Gulf, culminating in that splashdown in the Gulf just off the coast of Pensacola.
Dragon SpaceX for entry brief.
Go ahead.
Okay, Doug, we have no update to timing because the burn went great and your vehicle is still looking really good for entry. No health issues at this time.
Okay, Dragon copies. Thank you.
In addition, the recovery team is go and the weather is still great. Winds are about 2 knots and waves about 1 foot. From the ship, they're reporting very calm. How copy?
Copy. Good weather at the landing area. Thank you.
Okay, and last piece is that we do expect some additional RADICOM during entry prep 2 due to vehicle attitude. So if you can get us your entry check report a little bit prior to entry prep 2, we'd appreciate it.
Copy. We'll go.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
So there we just had a bit of a briefing between Mission Control and Bob and Doug up in Crew Endeavor, just confirming with them that the deorbit burn was great and that the timing on their pads doesn't need to be updated. We are able to upload new trajectory calculations, including times that remain live depending on how the burn goes, and at this point in time, those don't need to be updated. It is important that they do remain accurate because Bob and Doug, their primary mission right now is to continue to monitor the vehicle status and telemetry and data being presented to them on their touchscreen displays in front of them. And so during the more dynamic events, they certainly want to be aware when things like parachute deploy will be happening and when splashdown is expected. So making sure that the timeline of events, the sequencing is accurate is certainly important in order for them to stay aware and updated of upcoming events.
Just another quick position check. Dragon still out over the Central Pacific, down to about 108 miles in altitude. We're expecting that entry interface to come up in the next 4 minutes or so. Again, at that point, Dragon should be at an altitude of right around 62 statute miles, or about 100 kilometers, and that's when it really starts to feel the effects of the atmosphere. It starts to experience the lift and drag and other atmospheric effects it's been free from while flying in the near vacuum of low Earth orbit. So continuing to drop in altitude, still looking for an on-time splashdown. Should just be about 19 minutes from now. And just a reminder, we do have that blackout period coming. So as they continue to dip in the Earth's atmosphere and get lower and lower, the atmosphere gets thicker and thicker and is going to generate more and more heat, eventually heating up the outside of Dragon to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And as it hits that peak heating, it'll also be forming a plasma around the spacecraft. So we do expect to lose comm for about 6 minutes.
SpaceX Dragon crew entry preps are complete.
SpaceX copies. Entry prep complete. Thank you.
The call from Spacecraft Commander Doug Hurley. Entry preps are complete. So they are on board, they are monitoring, they are ready to come home.
Yeah, and as of right now, entry prep should have also included final configuration of their flight suits. So we had a question from our social media earlier if the visors will be up or down. Those visors should be down at this point as part of that entry prep check. In that last briefing, we also heard that the weather is looking good. In a previous report, the phrasing was, "It looks like glass." And that is certainly ideal for a water splashdown. That being said, the recovery timeline, Bob and Doug should be out of the capsule within an hour after splashing down. So good to hear that the weather is good. We saw blue skies and a couple of white fluffy clouds out there in the Gulf of Mexico as we got views from our recovery vessel Go Navigator. But glad to hear that conditions are sustaining and that winds also are looking really good, around 2.5 miles per hour. So hardly anything at all. Really couldn't ask for better conditions for a splashdown day.
We kind of threaded the needle once again, almost like we did on launch with the weather today. Your upper limits for wind were about 10 miles an hour, so we're well below that threshold for a splashdown today. The Dragon coming up on 82 miles in altitude, continuing to dip down. We're expecting that entry interface to start pretty soon, where the vehicle itself's really going to start heating up. It's going to continue to use its Draco thrusters to maintain its attitude as it continues through the Earth's atmosphere, and we'll have that calm blackout coming up in just a couple of minutes as well. Just heard the cabin purge has started again. This is when they're going to flush the cabin of Dragon with cooled air. They're also going to do a suit purge, running cooled nitrox through the suits for Bob and Doug just to keep things at a comfortable temperature for them as the capsule goes through the re-entry and starts to heat up.
So like we said, we are anticipating a brief blackout period where we're unable to communicate with the capsule. We're expecting that to start in exactly 3 minutes. That will last for 6 minutes total, and during that time, we will be unable to command the vehicle or receive telemetry. That being said, Dragon is designed to be fully autonomous, so it's driving itself anyway. So Bob and Doug will stay fastened in their seats. Like I said, that anticipated loss of signal, or as you'll hear it called LOS, is anticipated to last for just 6 minutes. During that blackout period, the capsule will encounter what's known as entry interface. This is when the capsule is now really in the Earth's atmosphere and beginning to be subject to aerodynamic forces. This is also when a lot of that friction will begin to build up and raise the external temperatures.
Dragon SpaceX, we show 2 minutes until predicted calm blackout. We will see you on the other side at 1842.
Dragon copies 1842. We'll talk to you then.
So there's that heads up communication from Mission Control to Dragon Endeavour, confirming that comms blackout. Like I was saying, during the blackout, the Dragon capsule will be going through entry interface, where it is encountering aerodynamic forces, really starting to build up the external temperature and that external temperature will reach about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. However, the interior of the cabin is environmentally cooled, so Bob and Doug should remain comfortable during their descent. There will be cool air flowing not only through the cabin itself, but also through their suits. The suits have sensors on them that are able to detect the temperature inside that suit, and once that sensor reads that it has reached the maximum temperature threshold, it'll flush the suit with some cool air and really circulate and cool it down.
All right, Well, we are right around that estimated blackout time. As we heard the call, we'll see them on the other side, expected to regain that communication at about 42 minutes after the hour. So for these next 6 minutes, they're already less than 60 miles in altitude. And this is when the capsule is really heating up during that reentry, reaching temperatures of around 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. As again, you're essentially hitting the atmosphere at more than 17,000 miles an hour, and the friction building up that plasma around the spacecraft. That's what's going to prevent us from talking to Bob and Doug or getting data back from the spacecraft for the next 6 minutes. As flight computers are in control, though, it's going to continue to maintain its appropriate trajectory and attitude, having attitude determination devices on board the capsule, not reliant on communications with satellites. And it's going to continue dragging down the correct path for this splashdown off the coast of Pensacola. So we are in that blackout period. We're going to continue to stand by until we get them on the other side. Right, and just about 2 minutes after we get acquisition of signal, AOS, back with Dragon, we're going to be looking for those parachutes, and we should hopefully be getting some views from a couple of our assets out at the landing zone, including our WB-57 high-altitude research plane, which is going to be relying on Dragon's telemetry to actually lock onto it in the sky and give us an infrared view of the capsule during the final stages of reentry. We're going to be looking for the drogue deploys at about 44 minutes after the hour. Those will be 2 drogue shoots that are going to come out when the vehicle is still moving at about 350 miles an hour. And it'll be at an altitude of about 18,000 feet. They'll come out and do some initial slowing and stabilization of the spacecraft. And then less than a minute later, they'll detach and the 4 main parachutes will deploy. You'll see them come out and look kind of closed up initially, and then they'll do what's known as reefing, opening up in really 2 different stages just to minimize the immediate loads on the parachutes themselves. Those main parachutes will come out at an altitude of about 6,500 feet, with Dragon already slowed down to 119 miles an hour, and they'll do the rest of the slowing the whole way down until we splash down in the Gulf of Mexico. We should be 10 minutes away from splashdown.
So right now we're getting our cameras on the WB-57 airplane, which is in the area, getting those cameras ready to give us our first glimpse.
Should still have about 3 minutes left, a little less than 3 minutes, until we anticipate reacquiring our signal and our connection with Bob and Doug in the Dragon spacecraft.
If you're just tuning in, we are in a blackout period that we were expecting. This blackout period will last a total of 6 minutes, and we're about halfway through there now. At the moment, Dragon is re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, and due to the plasma building up on the exterior of the vehicle, we're unable to communicate or send commands, but Dragon is fully autonomous. It is steering itself. And right now, Bob and Doug are flying home.
Dragon SpaceX comm check.
So we're still inside that anticipated blackout window. It does look like we are getting maybe some sporadic data starting to peek through. This is why you heard that communications check with the spacecraft.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
Denver has you loud and clear. We're about 3.9 G.
Copy. We've got you 5x5 as well, Doug. Looking good, and you can expect an automated chute deployment.
Copy. It'll choose the flight.
All right, really good news there. We have come out of the blackout period and we have reestablished connection with Dragon Endeavour with NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley on board.
We were able to reacquire that communication a little bit earlier than expected, and now we are just waiting. We should just be about 2.5 minutes away from that initial drogue chute deploy.
Yeah, 2 minutes and 26 seconds.
AGPS has converged.
Copy that.
You may have heard earlier that Bob and Doug are currently experiencing 3.5 Gs. Not too bad. That's about what they pulled during the ascent phase. Just like a mild roller coaster. So the vehicle is now over the Gulf of Mexico. It is approaching the landing zone off the coast of Florida near Pensacola. And there we have our first shot.
There it is. The first view from the WB-57 airplane. It is dipping in and out a little bit. This is going to be an infrared camera showing us Dragon re-entering. We have that comm back with Bob and Doug. You heard AGPS is converging. Dragon has 3 GPS units that it uses actually in the parachute deployment process as it helps, along with the pressure sensors, really give a solid altitude to the flight computers on when these are supposed to deploy. We're standing by for the drogue chute deployments. We should be just under 5 minutes away from splashdown.
Passing 15 kilometers, brace for drogue window.
Copy. We're braced.
Just about 14 kilometers in altitude, 8.4 miles, continuing to descend.
There on your screen, we have a shot of the capsule as it is preparing to deploy those initial parachutes, the drogue parachutes. Again, these parachutes help slow the vehicle down even further and help stabilize in preparation for main chute deployment. Right about now, the capsule is going about 400 miles per hour, decelerating quickly.
And standing by for drogue deploys.
Visual, 2 drogues out.
There on your screen, we have visual confirmation of those 2 drogue deployments.
Copy. D drogue.
All right, so 2 of 2, the drogues now out. They're going to do their slowing and stabilizing of the Dragon spacecraft. They should be detaching in just a few moments, and then we'll see 4 parachutes, the main parachutes deployed. Dragon under drogues.
Drogue descent rate nominal.
So the expected descent rate, the expected velocity under the drogues nominal. We're right at around 150 miles an hour and already dropping. You can see the drogues now detach.
And there we have confirmation of deployment of the 4 main parachutes.
We are visual on 4 chutes out.
We are visual. 4 main parachutes
Copy.
deployed.
4 main.
So at this point, the main parachutes have deployed. They are inflating, as you can see there on your screen, continuing to slow Dragon down significantly. We are anticipating splashdown in just under 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah, we've already slowed the vehicle down to about 16 miles an hour. It's already less than a kilometer in altitude.
Main chute descent rate nominal, passing through 700 meters.
So at this point, Dragon has saved all propulsion systems on
600
board.
meters.
600 meters.
And we're 600 meters above the Gulf of Mexico.
Should be approximately 1:30 from splashdown.
Mission control team here in Hawthorne has reported the precise landing coordinates to the recovery team. They are standing by, ready to go get our space dads.
100 meters.
Just passed about 300 meters. 1 minute till splashdown.
meters. We are braced for splashdown.
Copy, brace for splashdown.
So there we heard Bob and Doug reporting that they are bracing for a splashdown. We should be able to see the Gulf of Mexico here in the shot just momentarily, as we're now just about 20 meters off the ocean.
Splashdown.
As you can see on your screen, we have visual confirmation for splashdown.
SpaceX copies and concurs. We see splashdown and mains cut.
Dragon Endeavour has returned home. NASA astronauts Bob and
Endeavour,
Doug.
on behalf of the SpaceX and NASA teams, welcome back to planet Earth, and thanks for flying SpaceX.
It was truly our honor and privilege to fly in flight of the Crew Dragon and Endeavour. Congrats, everybody at SpaceX. All good, and we're into section of 4.800.
Thanks for those words, Doug, and we copy that you are into 4.800.
So great news all around there. Our space dads are back on Earth after a 19-hour return journey from space. Dragon Endeavour has splashed down in the Gulf of Mexico, just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. And on your screen there, you can see our two fast boats, and they are indeed fast, racing out to greet Dragon Endeavour as it sits there. The first on there, we can see a view inside the capsule. Bob and Doug looking good. Although the communication was a little choppy, we did hear...
SpaceX Endeavour in 3.1, we show ourselves in stable 1.
And SpaceX copies for vehicle assessment, step 3.1, stable 1. Good news.
Stable 1, essentially. They're upright in the water. Stable 2, also another potential where it could be on its side or even upside down, but Dragon does have a water ballast system to keep it upright, where it's able to essentially pump seawater into bladders in the service section of the capsule. But they're upright. We already see the fast boats approaching. They touched down, came right on time at 11:48 a.m. Pacific, 18:48 UTC. Bob and Doug now in the water, and the recovery ops, they've already begun. We already see the fast boats starting to move in. We're still maintaining that good communication back with Bob and Doug and the team here in Hawthorne. Pretty soon we should be getting the go for them to move in, begin their hypergol sniffs, and begin wrangling up those parachutes. But we can see Bob and Doug inside the capsule, back on planet Earth.
Yeah, those fast boats will be moving in to do a couple of things. They'll be performing what's known as a sniffer test. That's essentially to ensure that the air around the vehicle doesn't have any toxic fumes from the hypergolic propellants on board. So once we get the all clear from there, the water recovery lead will give the go for approach, and that's when the first fast boat will actually approach the capsule. Hopefully give a little wave to Bob and Doug through the window. And one of the team members will actually climb on top of Crew Dragon and begin to place the rigging equipment necessary to hoist Dragon out of the water.
Oh, still getting a view from the WB, the airplane flying overhead. It gave us those great views of really our first views of Bob and Doug re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. From up above. You can see the 4 parachutes in the water. We heard those were cut automatically as expected by Dragon. So for now, the crew just standing by. Again, they're going to stay in their suits, in their seats. We're waiting for all these initial checks.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
Loud and clear, hello.
Loud and clear as well. Just wanted to verify a quick comm reconfiguration. Thank you.
So essentially what just happened there is they reconfigured.
And Solo, if you can just relay the status of the fast boats and the recovery as you get them, we would appreciate it.
You bet. Absolutely, Doug. Wilco.
So what just happened there, you heard comms reconfiguration. That's essentially looping Bob and Doug's communication into the into the recovery team, so that they can hear feedback from Bob and Doug directly as well. Now, we talked a little bit about
SpaceX Endeavor. You can let Ben and James know we're doing pretty good so far.
Okay, we'll let the flight docs know that you're feeling good so far. Thanks for that update.
really good news there to hear that they're feeling good, and they can let the flight surgeons know that all is well inside Dragon Endeavor.
All right, and it sounds like we do have one of our folks that's on location there with the recovery forces, NASA's Brandy Dean. She's joining us by satellite phone. Brandy, if you can hear me, I mean, what is it like right there in the water? What was it like to watch
Dragon? We're
watch them splash down
for the test objective. So stand by at the console once we get it up and operating. I'll let you know.
Okay, SpaceX copies. We'll be ready for that in just a couple minutes. We should have the go for you in just a moment. Please stand by.
I can hear you, but they're good.
There in the center of your screen, Dragon capsule, waiting for the fast boats to approach and begin the rigging process. And there on the left-hand side of your screen, we can see that second fast boat come into view.
Dragon SpaceX, we are go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in just under a minute.
Dragon copies. Thank you.
All right, so they're starting to move in. As Kate just said, that first boat's going to go in, sniff around the capsule for any traces of hypergalls. The second one's going to start rounding up the parachutes, which we're getting some really cool views from the WV-57 still flying overhead. Looking down, you can see the parachutes in the water, and the second boat start to gather them up. We'll try one more time real quick. We have NASA's Brandy Dean out with the recovery forces. Brandy, if you can hear me, what was it like to watch this Dragon come down under parachutes?
Oh, it was amazing. I wish everybody could have had my view. It was such a beautiful sight. It was a gorgeous day. The water is calm, really the best weather we could have asked for. And we heard the sonic booms as it made its way back there, and we were able to spot it early on as the parachutes were deploying. So it was very exciting for everybody who was gathered here.
That's incredible. We actually had some questions from people if you'd be able to hear the sonic boom, and we weren't sure. So I'm really glad you just answered that for us. I mean, we talked so much about the weather. You said it looks great. What was it like on the ride out there? Has it just been kind of clear skies and clear seas the whole way?
I'm not sure if you can hear me right now, but I think you're asking about the weather, whether it was clear skies. There are just a kind of a circle of clouds along the horizon, very low, but we were able to see the parachutes far above the clouds and then follow it all the way until it splashed down.
All right, well, we're not getting any views on the boat, so what kind of activity is taking place right now? We're able to see the fast boats approaching the capsule. What's everybody doing on the boat to just kind of get everything ready?
The boat's also making its way towards the capsule. I can't see it with my mirror. But we're getting closer. Everybody's been kind of standing by, holding ready positions for quite a while now. So as soon as it splashed down, people to just stand and start working on their own activities.
All right, copy that. Well, we're going to keep watching from here. Thanks for calling in, and thanks for being out there with everybody and getting us these great views. It's really incredible. Thanks, Brandy. We hope to get you back in port soon, and we'll talk to you back in Houston.
So there on your screen, camera view change. That is a view coming to us from Go Navigator, the recovery vessel. The two fast boats are out there getting ready to install the rigging equipment required to hoist Dragon out of the water. The other fast boat is actually collecting the parachutes from the water. We definitely want to bring those back on board with us. But shortly here, we should actually see one of the team members crawl up onto the side of the capsule in order to install the rigging, like I mentioned. That particular team member is highly experienced and highly trained. As you can imagine, climbing on top of an oddly shaped thing in the ocean could be a little tricky. So this person has undergone hours and hours of training and certification in order to perform this very important task. There on the right-hand side of your screen, we see the second fast boat approaching. Of course, both of these boats needed to wait for their cue from the water recovery lead in order to approach Dragon after splashdown. Again, that was just to make sure that there weren't any toxic vapors in the air. And now that they got the all clear, we do see them beginning to work on and around the Dragon capsule. So even though the camera's a little shaky, that water looks super, super duper smooth, almost like glass, which is certainly ideal for a water recovery like today.
Yeah, got to remember that this is a view from the main recovery vessel, which was still a few miles away from the splashdown
Dragon
point.
SpaceX. We have hypercrawl sweeps and unfired ordnance checks nominal. Rigger is on board the vehicle. About 5 minutes until capsule lift.
After that, yeah, we see them walking outside, and good news.
All right, confirmation there that all of those hypergolic vapor tests came out positive, or rather negative, which is a positive thing. So the team was able to approach, and now the crew member that is installing the rigging is on top of the capsule. It's difficult to see there because the slower vessel, the primary recovery ship, is a little further away. But as we heard, it's just a mere 2.5 minutes until they will be hoisted out of the water. I'm sorry, 25 minutes, not 2.5. I misheard that.
Yeah, they're fast, but they're not that
Yeah.
fast. We also have been hearing that the secondary boat, which its primary mission in this case is securing those parachutes, they've already got buoys attached to both drogues, and 2 of the 4 mains, and already had eyes on the other 2, so they're moving through that work pretty quickly. Again, their primary responsibility, getting those parachutes together. The drogues detaching from the spacecraft right before the deployment of the mains automatically detaching immediately as Dragon detected splashdown. All of that happening right per the timeline.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about the hardwired buttons that Bob and Doug have on their seats and in their control displays, and cutting the main chutes is one of those buttons. In the event that they weren't automatically cut after splashdown, Bob and Doug would have had the ability to do so. If the winds were stronger and they caught the parachutes, it could certainly create a condition where the capsule could be moved unintentionally by those dragging parachutes. So definitely want to avoid that. So that's one of the few buttons that are hardwired into the cabin for the crew.
And again, right now we're expecting about 20 minutes for the main recovery vessel, the Go Navigator, to reach Dragon. By that point, all the rigging will be affixed, and then they'll be able to use the A-frame hydraulic lift on the back of the vessel to begin to pull Dragon up out of the water. Bob and Doug did report they're seeing the guys climbing around outside their window on the capsule, getting that rigging affixed. Still doing good from all of their reports. And we're just going to see the vessel continue to close in. It's a little over 1.3 nautical miles still away, but you can see things starting to sharpen up in our view as it does draw in closer.
One thing I didn't get to mention as the sequence events was happening, everything was going so quickly, just before the drogue deployment, the seats automatically rotated to about 26 degrees. And so if you think back to when we saw Bob and Doug while they were still on orbit and during the deorbit burn and all their departure burns, they were actually laying closer to on their backs at the 40-degree position, where essentially they were looking up at the top of Dragon capsule, like their stomachs were facing the top nose cone there. At this point, the seats would have rotated, so they're in a little bit more of an upright position. That's done to ensure that the loads experienced from landing are, doesn't hurt them. So at this point, they are not really laying on their backs in the ocean. They are seated upright a little bit, which would allow them to have a better view of the team working to install the rigging equipment. So at this point, we're at about 22 minutes until Dragon will be lifted onto the recovery vessel. Bob and Doug are still strapped into their seats, kind of like an airplane. They say, do not unbuckle your seatbelt until the captain determines that it's safe to do so. They will remain in their seats throughout the entire recovery process, essentially until it's time to get them out. Like I said, we are expecting to lift Dragon onto the Go Navigator recovery ship in about 21 minutes. And then in 28 minutes, we will be opening that hatch and beginning crew egress, also known as exit.
And we did hear the rigging is pretty much complete, so right as they arrive there at the capsule, the main recovery vessel will be able to begin getting it up out of the water.
So now as the recovery vessel Go Navigator is getting closer to Dragon's position there off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, we're able to see the capsule in a little bit more detail. It is certainly no longer a bright shade of white. Like we said, those external temperatures were reaching up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So the thermal protection systems enable Dragon to return while keeping the internal temperature rather temperate.
And you are seeing a few more boats than expected. The team's currently working with a few private vessels in the area, making sure that they get out of there. And now we see one of the SpaceX fast boats moving in.
So we are being advised that the recovery team is radioing out to the vessels in the water near Crew Dragon to vacate the area so that we're able to extract Bob and Doug safely. Also for the safety of those folks in the area as well, not just Bob and Doug.
Yeah, this is obviously a dynamic operation. One of the first things we do is make sure there aren't essentially poisonous fumes around the capsule, so something like this just really can endanger the whole thing, endanger the crew members and endanger themselves. So the SpaceX team's moving in to try and get them away so they can safely recover the Dragon capsule and get Bob and Doug on deck and safely inside their medical quarters. So we can see them, they're getting a lot closer. We expect about 10 minutes or so until they should be in position. All the rigging has been affixed on the Dragon capsule, and once they arrive, they'll be able to use that hydraulic lift to get Dragon up and out of the water.
So the recovery vessel Go Navigator is getting closer and closer to Dragon Endeavor as it awaits its recovery, as it awaits to be hoisted out of the Gulf of Mexico. Again, we landed just off the coast of Florida near Pensacola. Maybe next time we shouldn't announce our landing zone. Oh, there we got a shot from our WB-57 plane. It looks like that area has cleared out significantly, so that is good to see. And we're also hearing that all of the parachutes have buoys on them, so also good news as the recovery process continues for SpaceX Demo 2.
Dragon SpaceX for comm reconfig.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Doug, we're about to reconfigure the forward link. We may lose that for about 1 or so minutes, and that should happen shortly.
Copy. Yeah, just give us a call back when you think you got it back.
Will do.
So as the main vessel gets closer, it's going to back up and get its hydraulic lift set up right next to the Dragon capsule, still in the water. Bob and Doug still inside, just waiting for that recovery. We should start the hoisting operations in the next 10 to 15 minutes. And then it'll be a pretty quick lift up out of the water using that hydraulic lift into the Dragon nest on the deck of the boat, or the ship rather. And then they'll move it underneath the helipad into essentially the crew recovery area, where they'll have a platform right up to the hatch. They'll be able to open up the hatch. SpaceX medical doctor will be the first one through the door, able to do a quick check-in with Bob and Doug on their status. And then he and the other medical doctors, flight surgeons, and trained technicians will begin to help them out of the capsule.
Yeah, earlier, just after splashdown, we did hear Bob and Doug report that they were feeling good after reentry, so that was relayed to the flight surgeon, and good news to hear. Again, this is a view coming from the WB-57 plane as it is circling the area, and we can see Dragon awaiting to be pulled out of the water. Again, we are anticipating that lift to begin in just under 15 minutes. We're approaching 14 minutes here. And then in 21 minutes, we will have an open hatch.
And you can see the main recovery vessel in the top right there. That's the helipad with the big SpaceX X on top. It's now backing up towards the capsule.
Certainly not to be confused with one of our landing drone ships. There's a live view of Dragon floating in the water there in the background, along with many onlookers. Certainly from a safer distance at this point. This is a live shot coming from Go Navigator, our primary recovery vessel here. So it's Crew Dragon is also accompanied by the fast boats that are helping to bring it in closer. And there you can see a couple of the recovery team members on the deck. And also just behind them, we get our first good view of the nest. Yes, so this is essentially the nest in the background there. Dragon will be hoisted using the hydraulic lift out of the water and into that nest. That nest will then be pulled towards the camera from this view, towards those individuals on that upper deck there. And that's where the...
Dragon SpaceX comm check.
Loud and clear, Solo, how us?
Loud and clear as well, and from the video, it looks like the boat is about one length away, about 5 to 10 meters, backing up to you.
Copy that. Thanks for the update.
All right, so good news there. We're getting ready to see Dragon to be lifted out of the water and into the recovery nest. As I was saying, that nest will be pulled towards the camera, towards that upper deck that we saw there, and that's where the medical stretchers will be waiting to assist them into the medical bays for evaluation after capsule egress.
It's already been 25 minutes since they splashed down. It doesn't feel like it.
That was definitely the fastest 25 minutes of the day.
the timeline we were anticipating was for the lifting operations to start within about 30 minutes, so we're pretty much right on the timeline still. That's been a pretty common thing so far today. You can see them with one of the fast boats getting it positioned to start moving out with the additional rigging to affix to the Dragon capsule, where they're going to use this A-frame to pull it up out of the water. And you can see the Dragon nest at the very bottom. It's that circular object with the A1 right on it.
So while this is the first time we are recovering a capsule with crew members on board, the recovery team has been...
And Dragon, just letting you know, we got a couple lines connected, and rigging is in progress.
Copy that, SpaceX. Thank you.
All right there. So just updating the crew that they might feel some momentum as a couple of the rigging lines are attached. There we can actually, there's our first good shot of the individual who is placing that rigging equipment. Again, that's someone that's highly specialized and very well trained for these operations. As I was saying, the recovery team has rehearsed and practiced this with Bob and Doug themselves, actually, in a test capsule, practicing the egress as well as they have practiced the recovery process many times. And actually, through those practice runs, they have effectively cut the recovery period in half from the initial Demo 1 mission. So it's really nice to see that the process itself, after being rehearsed and carefully choreographed, is going super efficiently. Again, safety is the #1 priority, so making sure that only personnel involved in active recovery operations are present on the deck. You may have heard us mention before that there are about 40 people on board today, but we certainly don't want anyone in danger or to fall overboard. That guy intentionally jumped. Speaking of falling overboard.
We're ready. Thank you.
All right, so the crew was just told in the next 30 seconds, they have the lines affixed, so they're going to start lifting the capsule up out of the water. And at this point, the communication we're getting with Dragon is actually being routed through the boat itself at this point. So there we can see the lift. Dragon is out of the water.
Yeah, so
now
now
that A-frame's going to start swinging it back. And it's bound right for that nest at the bottom of your screen.
There we're getting a better shot of all the points in which Dragon is tethered to the hydraulic lift, ensuring that it isn't swinging freely. And there we can see Dragon Endeavour being carefully set down into the recovery nest on top of Go Navigator.
Dragon SpaceX, welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are completing final checks and preparing to translate you to the egress platform.
Be happy. Thank you.
So for the first time in 2 months, NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley are on some sort of ground. Guess we can't call it solid ground because it is a ship. However, it is the first time that they are not in space, on a rocket, or bobbing in the ocean.
So now that they're in the nest, they're going to start translating it forward. And Dragon's going to move into essentially the hangar section underneath that helipad and then up to that recovery platform that we saw a little bit earlier. At that point, the spacecraft technicians will work to open up the hatch. As we said previously, it's a manual process with a couple of different attachments you have to engage before the hatch itself can be opened. They'll get it opened, and then SpaceX's Neil Menon will be the first one through the hatchway to check in on Bob and Doug, get their initial health assessment, see if they're ready to move, and then we'll start assisting them out of the capsule and into that medical facility on the boat.
So at this point, the recovery team is doing final securing of the capsule in preparation to actually move the recovery nest into closer to the interior of the ship. It'll actually be in a little bit of a covered deck there. We saw that camera view earlier, looking straight out from the center of the boat. So once Dragon is secured in the nest will be translated then forward and closer to the recovery, closer to the position in which we're able to actually open the hatch. So while Dragon is on board safely, we're not able to do that just yet.
Yeah, they're working to detach some of those lines that were used to hoist it using the A-frame, and we heard that they should be done with that in just a moment, and then we'll start that translation.
So right now we can see the recovery team releasing those securing lines that were used during the lift of the capsule from the water into the nest. So they are releasing those securing lines from the sides, making sure it is secure from the bottom.
And there we see Dragon moving forward.
Look at that. Smooth as a Tesla, I would say. It's really interesting to see those scorching marks now that we get a really nice up-close detail shot of Dragon.
Standing by for the go for side hatch open.
That rounded square there in the center of the capsule is that side hatch. And on either side are those oval windows.
Dragon SpaceX, stand by for side hatch opening and egress.
Copy, we're ready.
All right, crew got the call. We are go for hatch open. And if you look closely, immediately above the hatch, you can see the area where you can see them working in now. That's where those drogue chutes deployed from. The two circles on either side were where the mortars were. The main parachutes now hidden by the platform underneath the side hatch.
So the crew is in the process of removing the side hatch. We can see that Go Navigator is in transit. It is making its way back to the Pensacola Naval Air Station. However, Bob and Doug will get a ride from the recovery vessel via helicopter. So again, we're preparing to open the side hatch, and once that is done, the flight surgeon will pop his head in, do an initial check, see how Bob and Doug are doing.
And Dragon SpaceX, we've got a slight delay due to some potential NTO hits near the side hatch.
Copy, Mike. We're standing by.
And so they're still continuing to do kind of those sniffs, so checking for any vapors or anything. So those NDO, it's NO2, nitrogen dioxide, primarily can get detected in the air from the burning of fuel. So they're going to continue to just inspect around the capsule, make sure that it's, again, safe for the crew, safe for the recovery experts before they get this hatch open. But again, moving right along the timeline, it's since they splashed down at 11:48 a.m. Pacific. And so again, they're just pausing the operations for a moment, doing some additional air sampling around the prop system. We still have telemetry being fed from the vehicle, so flight controllers here in Hawthorne able to monitor prop tanks, propulsion tank pressures, and not seeing any issues with those at the moment. So again, just a short pause in the operations as again, they're just sniffing around the capsule, making sure we don't have any readings that might indicate a fuel leak or anything around the vehicle. They did detect some NDO, some nitrogen dioxide, which is typically a residue that arises from the burning of fuel. So they're continuing to do just a couple of different air readings, grab samples essentially, before they proceed with the hatch opening.
And Dragon SpaceX update, we're still investigating. Looks like we'll be setting up a service section purge. We're working on a ETA for you.
Copy.
In case if you're just joining us, NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley have safely returned from the International Space Station. They made an on-time splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida at 11:48 a.m. Pacific, 18:48 a.m. Universal Time. And they have been pulled out of the water and hoisted onto the recovery vessel Go Navigator. And right now, the team is just completing, they did an initial check and found that there might be some remnant vapors, which we certainly don't want to be around when we have Bob and Doug coming out of the capsule. So the team is working to purge the service section in preparation for crew egress. Just a little commentary on the hatches that we've been talking about. So while Dragon's top hatch is used to connect to the International Space Station, that's the one that's located under the nose cone, which is currently hidden there at the top of the capsule. This is the side hatch is what is utilized for ingress and egress, both on the launch pad as well as coming up here on the recovery vessel. When the when the capsule is docked to the International Space Station, they will use the forward hatch to exit and enter the capsule. Something to note that once that side hatch is opened, it'll be the first time that Bob and Doug have gotten a breath of fresh air. The first time that they've been able to do so in 2 months since they boarded the Falcon 9 at the start of their mission back on May 30th.
Yeah, with an on-time splashdown, they returned with almost exactly 64 days in space on this mission, just a few minutes shy of that. So I know they're looking forward to it. At a minimum, in a little bit more of a stable condition now that they're on the boat, not in the water. But again, our team's just continuing to step through. They're reporting that they're seeing all of the vapor levels that they initially detected have been dropping, and that service section purge.
Dragon SpaceX, we show that levels are declining, but are continuing with purge.
Copy.
And in addition, just so you know, we are not seeing any, leak indications or anything like that. These are pretty small levels, but we still need to do the purge at this time.